some of you already know, EVPA is a membership organization currently gathering more than 220 members based all across Europe. These include foundations, social investors, academics, financial institutions, as well as service providers. In accordance with our strategic objective to co-create a well-functioning ecosystem for societal impact, EVPA also plays a decisive role to promote conducive policy environments, both at the European level and at the national level. Our policy work therefore relies on two main pillars that you can see on this slide. First, EVPA is acting as a European thought leader. Under that hat, we share key initiatives being undertaken by the EU in our sector, which is also the purpose of our EU webinar series. We also voice the concerns and expectations of our members to European policymakers through our intervention in expert groups and the contribution we bring to European consultations. Second, we are also developing a project called the National Policy Nexus, with the aim to better understand the national regulatory environments of individual countries and share some key policy levers prevailing in these markets. In 2016, we focused our efforts on the UK, France, Germany, Italy and Portugal, and we shall extend our focus to additional regions and countries in 2017. On this slide, you have more information about the various sessions we organize in the context of our EU webinar series, a project we started mid-2014 and through which we could reach more than 1,000 people. This series is really meant to connect policymakers and practitioners in the venture philanthropy and social investment sector around regulatory issues of interest. As you can see, we have already addressed issues such as social impact bonds, public procurement, retail impact investing or crowdfunding. In 2015, we had a first session looking at the European funding available to support social entrepreneurs, during which we focused on the guarantee instrument that was launched under the European Programme for Employment and Social Innovation, also known as EASY. If you are interested in these topics, all recordings and presentations are freely available on our website. To end this introduction, we would like to remind you that a very short survey will pop up on your screen at the end of this webinar. As your feedback is very useful to improve what we do, we would greatly appreciate if you could take 2 minutes to fill this in. By the way, it is also an opportunity to let us know about a specific policy topic you'd like us to address in our EU webinar series. So don't hesitate to grab this opportunity. Now, with all this in mind, I think we can officially launch today's webinar, which is really meant to provide venture philanthropy and social investment practitioners with an update on the EU funding available, with a special focus on what is referred to as EFSI social impact. Some of you might have heard of a number of concepts, such as the EASY program, the European Investment Plan, also called the Juncker Plan, the European Fund for Strategic Investments, also referred to as EFSI, the Social Impact Accelerator, and other initiatives, without really knowing how these connect to our sector and how they work in practice. In order to shed light on all this, we are very happy to welcome today some key representatives of the European Commission as well as the European Investment Fund. Through this session, we hope you'll have a better understanding of the general EU funding framework, while also learning about some new equity tools in support of social incubators, social business angels, and other payment by result schemes. Simon, can I ask you to present our panelists?
Yes, sure. We're indeed very glad to have a panel of 4 key European experts to address these important issues. Sitting with us in our Brussels office, we're happy to welcome Shadeen Viratam. Shadeen works for the European Commission within DG Employment, which is the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. As Program Manager within the unit of Job Creation, Shadeen focuses on easy financial instruments and EFSI. Also part of the European Commission and sitting with us in EVPA's offices, a warm welcome to Georgia Efremova. Georgia is part of DG ECFIN, the Directorate General for Economic and Financial Affairs, and most specifically the unit dealing with the financing of innovation, competitiveness, and employment policies. As a policy officer, Georgia deals with financial instruments in the area of social impact investments. Speaking to us from Luxembourg, we are also very happy to welcome two representatives of the European Investment Fund. Sylvia Manca is the manager focusing on social impact programs and institutional business development. Yvette Go is the head of social and environmental impact investments. Shadin, Georgia, Sylvia and Yvette, many thanks for having accepted to be part of this session, and we look forward to listening to you.
Thank you, Simon. Just a quick word about the program of today's session. It will be made of 4 main parts. In the first part, we will let Shadin give us an overview of EU's policies and funding instruments in support of social enterprises. Afterward, our colleagues from DG ECFIN, Georgia, will give us an introduction to the European Investment Plan, EFSI and its equity instruments for social impact. And she will be joined by Andon Kalibatsev for the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. The third part, EIF, so Sylvia and Yvette, will let us know a little bit more about the different EFSI equity instruments for social impact and really how they work in practice. And as we told you at the beginning, we will close this webinar with at least half an hour for Q&A and interactive exchanges. So really, again, don't hesitate to address your questions to our speakers in written form in the box, and we'll make sure we direct them to the right contributor. So without further delay, I'm happy to leave here the floor to Shadin Veratam from DG Employment. Thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you, Simon, for the introduction and for organizing this webinar. I'm very happy to be here to talk about this passionate topic, and hopefully together with my fellow panelists, we'll be able to help demystify types of actions that we're taking at the Commission, but also European Investment Fund, to give support to social enterprises. Now, boosting jobs, growth, and investment is one of the main priorities of the European Union. In line with this goal, the Commission considers entrepreneurship to be a powerful tool in getting Europe growing again and creating jobs. Job creation, however, is not only about the number of jobs. It is also about the quality of jobs and inclusiveness of labor markets. It is notably from this angle that social entrepreneurship comes into the picture. Our recent mapping study indicates that social enterprises are vehicles of job creation. During the period between 2008 and 2014, employment growth in social enterprises in Belgium notably was 11.5%, and social cooperatives in Italy added 20% new jobs, whilst the number of jobs in mainstream companies decreased during the same period in both countries. Today, we are still confronted with the aftermath of the crisis in Europe, whereby too many families live in poverty. According to the latest Eurostat figures, nearly a quarter of the EU population, approximately 119 million people, were at risk of poverty or social exclusion. In addition, too many young people find it difficult to realize their potential on the job market, with youth unemployment rates close to 43% in countries such as Greece and Spain. The emergence of social enterprises in this context is therefore an important development as they create new jobs, facilitate labor market integration, and bring about social innovation. With regard to the structure of my presentation, I will start by giving you the big picture, why EU support is needed, and what type of funding is and will be made available to help social enterprises get off the ground and grow. So first of all, what are we talking about? Social enterprises explicitly aim at achieving social impact, putting people above capital or profits. To put it simply, these are businesses which look beyond short-term profit maximization and uphold their responsibility towards their employees, their local community, and society at large. Social enterprises develop innovative approaches, models, or practices for resolving societal challenges in an entrepreneurial way to promote inclusive, socially fair, and environmentally sustainable economic development and social change. Their economic operations cover a broad spectrum of activities, including, in particular, social and economic integration of the disadvantaged and excluded vulnerable groups, social services of general interest, reducing emissions and waste, or producing renewable energy. In essence, social enterprises share three common dimensions: social, entrepreneurial, and governance. First of all, these are enterprises with an explicit primary objective to generate social impact or societal impact, and which reinvest a large part of their profits to advance this goal, with limits on the distribution of profits to shareholders and owners to ensure a social mission lock. And finally, these enterprises are managed in an entrepreneurial, accountable, and transparent way. For your information, the definition is included within the guidance document for social impact investors that is available online. Now, what is important to know is that these enterprises have the tremendous capacity to boost social innovation, to create sustainable and accessible jobs, and to promote civic participation, social cohesion, and trust among local communities. And this part of the economy can therefore make a difference in helping to meet the Europe 2020 objectives for employment, innovation, climate change, energy sustainability, education, and social inclusion. The European Commission recognizes the added value that social enterprises bring to our economies and our societies. This is why in 2011, the Commission launched the Social Business Initiative, which established a concrete action plan to stimulate the creation, development, and growth of social enterprises. Yet, they are faced with barriers, which include difficult access to funding, a lack of visibility, a lack of business support and development structures, and an unadapted regulatory environment. The Social Business Initiative covered three areas: visibility and recognition, access to finance, and the regulatory framework. Although I will not go into any details, DG Employment has been in charge of implementing actions in relation to the first two. Here, what is important to know is that at EU level, the political attention translated into concrete measures through specific regulations, such as the USEF, which is the European Social Entrepreneurship Fund, better recognition and relevant regulatory measures, for example, the revised 2014 Public Procurement Directive, and funding program, structurally under the EASY program, which I will talk about later, and in a European Social Fund investment priority, whereby more than 1 billion euros have been dedicated by member states to investments in this area, but also through mainstream programs such as Erasmus Plus and Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs that specifically address this issue. Ultimately, we recognize that there is a massive untapped potential and there are obstacles which hamper the development of these social enterprises in many countries. One of them, which I would like to draw your attention to, is access to finance. Lack of or poor access to finance is still perceived as one of the most significant barriers for starting up a social enterprise, ensuring its sustainability and growth. The Social Business Initiative emphasized that the funding system for social enterprises is underdeveloped in relation to that used by other businesses. This was confirmed by an ex-ante assessment that looked at imperfections in the social investment market and a commission study on mapping of social enterprises and their ecosystems in Europe, as well as a number of national studies which would confirm that the demand for social enterprises for capital is not met in most parts of Europe, with the largest funding gap being for investments of below 500,000 euros, which are required to meet the needs of social enterprises. In addition, a number of barriers to develop and strengthen the market for social finance have a different weight across Europe, the most relevant being, on the supply side, despite improvement to the social finance investment market, the supply side remains underdeveloped in most member states. There is no level playing field regarding access to finance because mainstream financial institutions are largely unaware of the economic potential of such enterprises. On the demand side, support is also needed since there is an acute lack of investment readiness support in most member states. To be able to access the social investment market, social enterprises have to be investment ready. Moreover, the job creation potential of social enterprises is currently not being optimized due to a lack of support for scaling through business expansion, for example. And in this respect, business development services such as coaching, mentoring, and training need to be adapted to the specific needs of social enterprises, taking into account their dual social impact and economic mission. The conclusion is, therefore, that EU support here is needed to help bridge the funding gap and to boost both the demand and supply sides of the social enterprise finance market. One very concrete action undertaken by the Commission in this area is the EU Programme for Employment and Social Innovation, or EASY as we like to call it. Under the EASY program's Microfinance and Social Entrepreneurship Axis, one of the specific objectives is to facilitate social enterprises access to finance by making available financing for social enterprises, which could take the form or a combination of equity, quasi-equity, and debt instruments, but also to support the development of social investment markets. The EASY Microfinance and Social Entrepreneurship Axis has a total budget of 193 million euros, out of which at least 86 million euros, so approximately half, will be dedicated to supporting social entrepreneurship. Under this EASY program, we are developing a complementary set of debt and equity financial instruments to boost support for such social enterprises. Now, this slide provides an overview of the instruments that we have launched so far and that are under development. Firstly, so far we have deployed the EASY Guarantee Scheme, which is implemented on the Commission's behalf by our friends from the European Investment Fund. The EASY Guarantee was launched in June last year for both microfinance and social entrepreneurship. Here, I will not go into any details since there was a specific webinar, as Eleanor mentioned, on this topic, which you can access on the EDPA's website. But what is important to know is that here, 40 million euros have been earmarked for social entrepreneurship by providing credit risk protection on loans given by intermediaries to social enterprises. To date, 6 guarantee agreements for social entrepreneurship have been signed with intermediaries in 5 member states, which include France, the UK, Poland, Spain, and Austria, for a total amount of 6.3 million euros, and more deals are in the pipeline. These 6 signed deals alone are expected to unlock more than 60 million euros in financing for social enterprises. In other words, for every euro of EU support, 6 euros ends up as financial support for social enterprise. Secondly, again, together with our friends from the EIF, the Commission launched last month the so-called Social Impact Equity Instruments under the European Fund for Strategic Investments, EFSI, under the SME window, for which a call for expression of interest has been published last month. This is the reason why we are here today. Georgia, Sylvia, and Yvette will provide you with more insights, but in essence, what is important to know is that these instruments will help boost social investment markets and provide new opportunities for early-stage social enterprises in Europe to start up and grow. As part of these instruments, the Commission is also exploring the possibility to give grants to help cover the transaction costs related to the equity investments, in particular to encourage small ticket sizes investments of below 500,000 euros, which, as I said earlier, is the main funding gap here. Thirdly, soon we will be able to announce the launch of the capacity building investment window with 8 million euros dedicated for social entrepreneurship. This is namely equity to help financial intermediaries invest in their modernization, for example, in ICT, infrastructure, staff training, thereby helping them build up their capacity. Fourthly, this would also be complemented by senior and subordinated loans to intermediaries to further facilitate on-lending to social enterprises, amongst others, as of the first quarter of next year. At this stage, we are also exploring, together with our friends from the European Investment Fund, other products to further complement this product mix. Our instruments under the EASY program will also receive a sizable boost from the European Fund for Strategic Investments, EFSI, whereby, amongst others, we will also more than double the Union's support for the EASY Guarantee instrument. My colleague Georgia will provide a few more details here. Finally, following a European Parliament preparatory action that was launched in 2013 and which gave rise to 21 pilot projects across 15 different countries, a follow-up grant of approximately 2 million euros to boost both the supply side as well as demand side for social enterprises is foreseen. Here, about 20 projects mobilizing cooperation between key stakeholders will be supported and are due to kick off as of next month. To conclude, developing the social enterprise finance market is a long-term endeavor and will require continued EU investment and support as both a catalytic and signaling effect. I will now hand over the floor to my colleague Georgia, who will give more insights into how the investment plan for Europe fits into this picture and to introduce the equity instruments, which are the main topic of this discussion.
Thanks a lot, Shailene, for this very, very important introduction and an overview of what the EU is doing and the Commission, the different instruments the Commission is now implementing. I think it's very clear that it's unclear for some people, and I'm quite sure this overview is really helpful. As you said, I think we can now let Georgia let us know a little bit more about this EFSI EFSI pillar of the Juncker plan.
Thank you very much, Eleanor, and good afternoon, everyone. It is an extreme pleasure to be here and to be able to speak about the Investment Plan for Europe and EFSI, which have really opened a new chapter for investment in Europe, and to discuss with you how EFSI could play a catalytic role and steer investment into the social impact sector, unlocking and attracting more funding that is also better suited to social enterprises. Now, yes, indeed, I want to start by saying that EFSI is just the first pillar of the Investment Plan for Europe, often dubbed as the Juncker Plan. The plan was launched as a joint initiative of the European Commission and European Investment Bank in order to help EU member states to overcome the current investment gap by mobilizing private finance and channeling it to the real economy. The ambitious target, you have heard it, is to have a total of 315 billion of overall investment into final beneficiaries by mid-2018. Now, this aim is very much complementary to the broader EU policies for smart, sustainable and inclusive growth. And at the heart of it is the additionality of investment. That is, support goes to risky projects in strategic sectors. These are projects with high externalities and public value, such as social impact, which would not have been financed without the EFSI support. Now, next, I would like to very briefly present the three pillars of the investment plan. So going beyond EFSI, the advisory and project support and regulatory strands of the plan, which are complementary. They are meant to work together in order to achieve the plan's ambitious targets. And I would also like to present all three because in respect to social impact investments, the idea going forward is very much to use all three pillars and to tap into the full potential of the investment plan for social impact. So briefly, first looking at EFSI as the first pillar, it's important to mention this is a guarantee fund, right? It is benefiting from a 16 billion guarantee from the EU budget, complemented by an allocation of 5 billion of EIB's own capital. So essentially, the fund provides risk-bearing capacity for the EIB group for investments into infrastructure projects and target groups such as SMEs and small mid-caps. Investments are deployed under two windows, the infrastructure and innovation window and the SME window. And these are implemented by the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund, respectively. The second pillar is focused on project support. So we have two platforms which were established to support EFSI by providing visibility of investment opportunities and advisory and support for project preparation. First, we have the European Investment Project Portal. This is the online marketplace or a speed dating platform, if you wish, where investors and project promoters can meet. And secondly, and more importantly, we have the European Investment Advisory Hub, also referred to as EIA, which is an advisory platform to help structure projects make best use of available resources. So the EIPP is implemented by the Commission, and the advisory hub, EIA, is implemented by EIB Advisory Services. And now the hub has a real potential for extending a platform dedicated to advisory support for social impact, social economy projects and social enterprises. There are already existing cases and projects to develop the investment readiness of social enterprises, and this is a very promising direction. To go forward, we have the capacity to have many more such projects and to support them. So finally, the third pillar is about removing barriers to investment and improving the business environment. And there are already a number of developments to facilitate the equity investing product development, such as the Capital Markets Union. But our future actions in terms of social impact investment is looking into ways to alleviate some of the regulatory hurdles faced by both social impact investors and social enterprises, and exploring various regulatory incentives or good practices to be implemented on European level that may be beneficial to the sector. And this goes very much in addition to what Shadin already mentioned as actions that we have implemented earlier in this regard. So future direction is really trying to see how to combine these elements and these strands under the investment plan. But now let's look at what already exists. Thank you. So the social impact measures we have so far developed are under the EFSI SME window. This window has an overall budget of 5.5 billion euro and currently features a mix of facilities covering both debt and equity financing and addresses the specific needs of target group of SMEs and small mid-caps in their early as well as expansion stages. And as you see, social enterprises are very much now a target group under the SME window. And the way it went, so since its launch in 2015, the first measures under the SME window were really to reinforce some of the existing facilities, such as COSME and Innofin, more recently the EASY facilities. But there has also been a dedicated effort to develop new instruments in order to meet unaddressed needs. So the recently launched equity product providing risk capital for SMEs and small mid-caps and social enterprises is one such instrument. So the opportunity, so to speak, is that the social impact became one of the dedicated focuses of investment within the overall financing of the equity product, along with technology transfer, business angels, fund of funds, and others. But which means that we are now able to support social enterprises with critical forms of risk capital by piloting a number of innovative instruments. As Shadin mentioned, with a strong focus on early stage social enterprises in need of smaller investment and plenty of non-financial support. Now on the next slide, what you see, we have a different view of what you already saw in Shadin's presentation. This is very much a picture of all the contributions of EFSI directed to social entrepreneurship. Just to put things into perspective, so on the one hand you have EFSI contribution towards the Easy Cap Guarantee Facility, doubling its capacity. With a contribution of 100 million, and we also have a planned sizable EFSI contribution to the future products to be developed under EASY, again with 100 million. So both of these represent a significant commitment to this sector. But now coming very much to the center stage, the equity product and the social impact pilots developed under it. What is important to know about the equity product is altogether 2 billion euro product, which combines financing from EFSI, the EC, so that is the Innofin facility, and the EASY, very much for the support of the social impact pilots, and EIF co-investment. And resources are pooled differently depending on the type of investment. This is mostly related to the stage of development of the enterprises to be supported. But the overall allocation for the social impact window is 150 million. And as Shadin mentioned, these are focused interventions really to deliver the right mix of support for social entrepreneurship and social innovation. This is the first EU instrument providing equity and quasi-equity support to social enterprises, and is very much complementary to the rest of EASY financial instruments, including the existing guarantee and future funded product, which would allow social enterprises to receive loans. And now concretely looking into the social impact pilots we have developed. First of all, we have a social incubation facility which aims to accelerate the investment readiness of social enterprises. Now, technically, the pilot is called Are you ready? Investments in or alongside financial intermediaries linked to incubators, accelerators, and or funds that provide incubation services. My EIF colleagues will walk you through this specifically. I just want to say that the name very much portrays our goal of what and who we aim to support through this action. So that is young social enterprises in their early and pre-commercial stage in need of smaller investment tickets. And in parallel, we aim to support smaller vehicles or investment funds, which provide such seed support in addition to incubation and business development services, and which may have a harder time to attract mainstream social impact investors. So through this pilot, we will be looking to improve the sustainability and really support vehicles working with smaller enterprises and which place high value on the social return on investment and the social value created. So for instance, we have a higher percentage of the total investment into such vehicles, which we could provide, and an asymmetric risk sharing with other investors is possible, which is a special exception than what is allowed for under the other equity product investment. And the same goes for the second pilot, the Social Business Angels facility, where we aim to co-invest with business angels targeting social enterprises at their seed and early stages. Again, ideally through smaller investment sizes, pension capital, and support that does not have that quick turnaround mentality. And you would notice that we have an indicative minimum amount for these pilots, and depending on implementation, they could be scaled up to reach the overall allocation of 150 million. You would also notice that the first pilot is of higher value to us, so the indicative minimum amount is a bit higher. Okay, and then last but not least, we have the payment by result or the social impact bond pilot instrument, which is another tool to support the development of the social impact market in Europe and to scale up social service provision by the public sector. Now, it is to be noted that such actions will, of course, be complementary to existing public service provision rather than replacing it. And in this pilot, we have placed a special focus on supporting the setup of such schemes in Central and Eastern European member states. And this is also the way of providing equity and quasi-equity financing for social enterprises in these less developed equity markets. Now, this instrument is for us very much about experimenting with innovative procurement mechanisms. And the hope is that through this pan-European PBR platform we aim to establish together with the EIF, we would be able to develop a blueprint of sorts, which may over time help member states in replicating and really saving time and the significant resources associated with, usually with setting up such schemes. And I think this will be true value added for this EU product. And in addition to national promotional institutions as local partners in implementation, the advisory hub of the investment plan could be engaged with providing additional technical assistance to PBR commissioners. And last, I would like to say that, of course, outcome-based financing models are currently gaining ground and attracting significant interest because of their potential in supporting scalable and proven intervention models, the cost saving and accountability associated with the efficiency of these interventions, the potential for risk sharing and alignment of interest between stakeholders, etc. That said, they're not a panacea, and this is why we are just testing this model at this stage. Nevertheless, we hope that the instrument could support the broader shift towards thinking about outcomes and impact. So very much the way we value, create, and measure social impact. And this is what we're all here for. So with this, yes, I could maybe give the word to EIF colleagues.
Thanks a lot, Georgia. I think this little detour, let's say, through the investment plan for Europe is really useful because it really explains where EFSI comes from and how it can also complement, these initiatives from the Commission in support of social enterprises. It's true also that it's important to say that the Commission is learning by doing, and being associated with practitioners is kind of the spirit in these exercises, and sometimes it's not totally understood. With this in mind, I think we can now head to Luxembourg and let our colleagues from the European Investment Fund, and Yvette, let us know more in practice about these three instruments of the EFSI social impact. So I think if you are with us, I think they're connected. So we will leave the floor to Sylvia and Yvette.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. And again, many thanks to Elinor and Simon for organizing the webinar, and a warm welcome to all the people that decided to join us this afternoon. So maybe just to start with a few words about the European Investment Fund. As probably the majority of the audience knows, we are an European institution based in Luxembourg. And when we talk about EIF, we usually talk about SMEs in general, because this is actually the primary, let's say, target for almost all our programs. And our activities is deployed according three main business lines. The first one is equity, then we have the guarantees and securitization, and then we have microfinance. And in 2015, we have roughly 19.4 billion in total outstanding commitments across these three business lines, mobilizing approximately 75 billion of investment towards the SMEs and other final recipients. Now, let's dive into the heart, basically, of the purpose of today's seminar. If we move to the next slide, we try to summarize basically what are the products and the instruments that EIF is currently managing, or that we will manage in the near future, given that some of the instruments are still under development. And here you find summarized the three main funding sources, which combine to each other. They allows us and our friends from the European Commission and from the EIB to make these tools available for the purpose of supporting social enterprises, but also some of them enterprises. And for the purpose of today's webinar, we will then focus on the left-hand side of the chart, where you see that the figures highlighted in a different color, and in particular on the tools made available through EFSI. Nevertheless, you might have heard in the presentation before made by Shadine and Georgia that the engagement of the EU institutions to build a fertile ecosystem for the support of social enterprises within the EU and also beyond started already some years ago with a number of initiatives, and you've heard some of them before. If we move to the next slide, you will see where actually the let's say the pioneering activity of the EIF started in the impact investing space. Some of you might be familiar with the Social Impact Accelerator, which we launched in 2013, and which represented the first pan-European public-private partnership, which aims at addressing the need for equity finance to support social enterprises. The SIA operates as a fund of funds, which is managed by the EIF, and invests in social impact funds, which in turn strategically target social enterprises across Europe, but also across candidate countries and potential candidate countries. In the context of SIA, typically what we call, let's say, social enterprise shall be a self-sustainable SMEs whose business model serves to achieve a social impact. It shall therefore provide an entrepreneurial solution to a societal issue which is based on a scalable approach and shall have a measurable impact. And the word measurement of impact is very important when we talk about social enterprise, and actually Yvette later on will guide us through the model the EIF developed to measure the social impact. SIA reaches the final closing basically in July 2015 at the size of 243 million, combining resources from the EIB group, meaning the European Investment Bank and the EIF, plus external investors such as Credit Cooperative, Deutsche Bank, the Finnish group Citra, and the Bulgarian Development Bank. Where do we stand with the implementation of SIA? If we move to the next slide, you will see that so far SIA has invested in 9 social impact funds spread across 5 countries for a total amount of 95 million committed out of the 243 million of size. And we have supported so far 33 portfolio companies thanks to this investment. Of course, the investment activities of SIA is still ongoing, so other investment opportunities in other geographies are in the pipeline. Now, let's move to the next chart, where that has been actually described greatly by Shadeen and Georgia. So I think you're already now made clear in your mind what are the key words for these 3 new impact investing tools that we made available recently. Actually, the call for expression of interest to access to this new funding was made available the 14th October 2016 on the EF website. The 3 key words, as we said, are incubators and accelerator on one side, business angels, and then payment by results. And Yvette will guide us through the technicalities of each of them in a few minutes. I think what is important to highlight here is what we see summarized in the next slide. The fact that we have partnered together with the European Commission to extend and to further enrich the tools to support the social enterprises across Europe. In this slide, you see summarized actually the typical development stage of an SMEs or social enterprise or micro enterprises, and the type of tools the EIF has made available, addressing basically each stage of development of this entity. Basically, in order to address the needs of a very largely heterogeneous market for microfinance and social enterprises in the EU 28 and beyond, but also to work with a wide range of financial intermediaries, we have therefore adopted a multi-product strategy which is based upon a large number of products. And in particular, if you focus on the ones which are highlighted in yellow, these are the ones we are talking about today, meaning equity tools in the social impact space. And you will see that the tools that we are going to describe are actually complementary to what we made already available in 2013 to the social impact funds, which are a bit, let's say, higher or at least going towards the emerging growth and development directions of the development stage, let's say, of the social enterprise. And you will see that thanks to the incubator and accelerator, we will try also to address needs from the pre-seed phase, so the pre-commercial stage. Then we move a bit ahead with business angels, where we'll try to finance the seed phase and the startup. And then we will try to pioneer in the payment by results space. I would like to mention that this indication, these boundaries are just, of course, indicative. So, of course, we will treat each instrument with the flexibility vis-a-vis the market. So this is just to say that what we're trying to build together with the Commission and also other investors is a complementarity set of tools to address different needs and also to fit, let's say, the needs of a different type of financial intermediaries. Now, when we talk about EFSI, and if we move to the next slide, we will have just a summary about the key investment parameters of the NFC equity investment. As you know, EFSI is a big program, and in particular this EFSI equity, which was made available a few weeks ago, entails, let's say, different work streams. But there is a kind of fil rouge that is applicable to all the investment qualified under EFSI. And we thought it was important for you to know what are the key parameters to be eligible for an EFSI investment, but also what are the undertakings that we're going to require to a financial intermediary once we will enter into an agreement. First of all, when we talk about EFSI, let's say for social impact, what are the financial intermediary? What is the nature of this entity that we are talking about? Typically, in this space, we are talking about venture capital funds, co-investment scheme, business angels agreement, special purpose vehicles, and any type of structures which undertakes long-term risk capital investment towards social enterprises, SMEs, small mid-cap, social sector organization, and so on and so forth. And the type of instruments that are allowed are, for instance, equity, preferred equity, hybrid debt equity, other type of mezzanine finance, etc. Then what the entity needs to demonstrate? Well, first, to be managed by an independent management team and combining the appropriate mix of skills and experience, have a clear strategy to generate deal flow, and apply, of course, the good and appropriate market practice. In terms of size of the investment, the EIF, through EFSI, can go up to 50 million of the overall size of the vehicle of the financial intermediary, provided that this represents at least 7.5% of the size at the closing at which EIF is joining, if you're talking about the funds, up to typically 50%. It is true that under exceptional circumstances and depending on the EIF assessment, we can exceed this threshold of 50%, for instance, where the EIF participation is proven to have a very catalytic effect for other investors to join later. The EIF usually rank at least pari passu with other investors, with an exception with regards to the incubators and accelerator, where some asymmetric risk sharing could also be considered. Then we come to a very important undertaking that is requested to the financial intermediary. What is the amount that I need to invest in eligible beneficiaries? Well, we have this 2 times or 2/3 rule, which means that the financial intermediary is going to be needs to target in his investment strategy to invest 2 times the amount which is invested by the EIF, or 2/3 the amount which is drawn from all investors. And of course, this should be into eligible beneficiaries that, for the purpose of EFSI, are entities which are established or operating in the EU and that do not, let's say, contravene to specific policy sector, for instance, the EIF restricted sectors. The typical duration of an EIF investment is 15 years plus 3 years renewable, let's say. I think that I will, this of course is a non-exhaustive list, and I invite you all to have a look at the complete list that is available online on our website. And actually at the end of this presentation you'll also find the useful link to check, let's say, all the eligibility criteria of the EFSI investment. And I will now leave the floor to Yvette for the technicalities of each and every instrument.
Well, hello everyone. Also on my behalf, thank you everyone for attending this conference, and thank you to the EVPA for making it possible for us to tell you more about these new tools. As we move on to the next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit more in the next 3 slides actually about how the structure works. So this one is the first one. The first tool that has already been mentioned is investment by EIF alongside financial intermediaries that are linked to incubators or accelerators. Now, how does that work? It means that the EIF would act as an investor, in fact a co-investor, because that would typically be alongside other private and institutional investors, into a financial intermediary. And this financial intermediary would be linked, so with some privileged access to incubators or accelerators, which would have in their pool of young companies that they're supporting and that they're fostering, have social enterprises. The financial intermediary would have a privileged right, or a privileged link to invest in social enterprises that they find interesting enough to support in their development, where they see growth potential. But these can be social enterprises that are at the very early stages of their development, as said, because they actually come out of our linked to the incubator accelerator to which the fund is linked. When I say fund, it's a financial intermediary. Typically it could be structured as a fund, like a venture capital fund, except that with venture capital perhaps you'd expect underlying social enterprises to be more developed, and in this case we're targeting those social enterprises that may be too early to invest in for a classical sort of social fund, venture capital fund, but could be invested by a financial intermediary that is linked and specialized in these kind of early stage companies. We would envision that apart from the typical fund structure, perhaps because this is also a new field and we would like to use this opportunity, as George already said, to put out pilots to see how that would scale or potentially scale in the future. It could be through different structures. So other structures we've been contemplating, for instance, being co-investment alongside existing investment pockets within accelerators. But that is something that is, and that's fairly, I think, novel within the European Investment Fund space, where traditionally we've been in predefined tools like fund-of-fund structures. We have some flexibility to contemplate other structures. Now, of course, all of these would have to fit certain requirements, standards, and I'll get later to the more general sort of specific things or aspects that we evaluate when we look at a proposition. If we move to the next slide, you will see how the co-investment with business angels, so that's the second tool, how that would be structured or what it would look like. So in this case, EIF would act as a co-investor alongside a business angel or a business angel fund, and that can be anywhere within in Europe, within a region in a geography as Sylvia has defined. They would invest into, or we would invest alongside the business angels into a co-investment vehicle, or it could be as simple as an agreement, a co-investment agreement. And alongside a business angel, typically in a ratio 1-to-1, they would invest in a portfolio of social enterprises. Now, the reason why also this tool is very important is also because the business angels are quick in decision making and are targeting the earlier stage companies where perhaps a venture capital fund would need more time or more institutionalization of such an underlying social enterprise before they could invest. And business angels would actually also target that earlier space. We are actually quite familiar already with this tool. We have a number of business angel co-investment mandates within the EIF, mostly on a national basis, so with different individual countries. And this would be a pan-European tool, actually, where out of this pocket we could invest in business angels located in the various countries of the European Union. So that would be a novel one, but the system, the structure underneath it would be, the way it would function would work the same. If we would move on to the next slide, that is the presentation, a schematic presentation of the payment by results scheme. That's a distinctly different one because it doesn't work as a sort of co-investment vehicle or a fund. It really is an investment in it is again in a financial intermediary. We would never do direct investments, but this financial intermediary could be specifically a special purpose vehicle that is established to solve a certain to achieve a certain social outcome. So EIF in this case would be a co-investor with other private and institutional investors into a special purpose vehicle, for instance, which would be managed by the payment by results manager, which actually doesn't need to be the private institutional investor, but could be, because they would typically take it. We would require a co-investment. But that intermediary or that special purpose vehicle then pays into a social enterprise, a social sector organization that delivers outcomes for local governments and for governments to solve a certain social issue. And then, of course, when the outcomes are achieved, the social outcomes are achieved, that government institution collaborating on the payment by results scheme, the social impact bond, would pay back for the achievements to the financial intermediary. So that is those are the three structures of the instruments. If we move on to the next slide, I would like to say a little bit more. Sylvia already lifted the tip of the word impact measurement, something that's very typical, and it's actually the first time we have implemented as European Investment Fund is in the Social Impact Accelerator that Sylvia explained, is that we require, this very specific for the social impact space, we require the financial intermediary to measure the impact of the activities that it finances. How does that work? And to measure the impact, and I'll get to that, it's an integral part of the proposition. Setting up this, making this impact measurement, you go through three, it's very classical stages. Basically, we require the intermediary with every investment it makes to go through to identify the social objective that the underlying investment, or the investee, the portfolio company, is aiming to achieve by identification of the social issue, and then elaborating on what the change theory would be, and doing a stakeholder mapping. The next step to go through is to do a stakeholder analysis, whereby the actual stakeholders would be selected, targeted would be selected, the stakeholder expectations would be analyzed, and then the objectives for each of these stakeholders would be defined. And finally, of course, with each of the investments, the impact that would be traced would be defined. So what would be the what are the stakeholder-specific metrics that are relevant for the activity that we would like to improve, and then, of course, this needs to be measured and reported. Typically, we would require a reporting on a biannual basis or a half-yearly basis. To summarize that, that means that for each underlying investee, financial intermediary would define 2 to 3 key performance indicators that actually are linked to core social impact, social outcome that the underlying organization, the social enterprise, aims to achieve. The only exception to these 2-3 KPIs is the payment by result schemes, because the impact reward is already linked into, it's captured in the fee structure. But for the other tools, we would look at we would require the financial intermediary to identify those key performance indicators. And another specific feature, and that was something we've implemented with the Social Impact Accelerator, SIA, for the first time, is that the financial intermediary's financial reward at the end of the journey is linked to the achievement of the social impact across the portfolio. That is something that is regarded as fairly novel, and particularly in the classical sort of fund-of-fund structures, it's often a point of extensive debate and discussion, because if there is a financial reward, why shouldn't intermediaries receive it? Well, we think, to put it very bluntly, that an intermediary does need to put the money where the mouth is. These instruments that we thankfully are able to implement, also thanks to the collaboration with the European Commission, are there specifically to target social impact, and therefore the achievement of financial reward must be linked to achieving the social outcomes that were targeted in the first place. All right, so if we move on to the next slide. This is a presentation in more general. What are the kind of things we would look at? So if we receive an investment proposal, the core thing where the whole investment proposition starts is what will be the investment strategy of the financial intermediary, of the proposition. And in the social impact space, this is very closely linked to the impact thesis, the theory of change that they're trying to achieve, and so by which they target specific investment objects, investment recipients, and it would depend on the market opportunity or the need that they're trying to address. So the investment strategy would be at the core, addressing a real market opportunity or need, and the impact thesis needs to be carefully defined. That's actually a first step to understand the proposition. Then of key importance is the team or the business angel who is going to be executing the investment strategy. What we see typically in this space is that team, if you look at the classical fund of funds, people look at traditional track records and financial investment experience. What we see in the social impact space, and we already see it a lot with the SIA, is that teams are typically, there are many first-time teams. We don't see that as a hurdle in itself. What we will look for is in the team compositions, that all the different skills and experiences that we believe are required to address and to execute upon investment strategy are present. So that would mean you typically would have a team that is composed of people with very different backgrounds, that have the right sectorial, financial, but also operational experience to actually execute upon investment strategy. And then there's the vehicle structure and size. Now that is probably the part that is the most flexible in the current setup. So particularly if you look at the payment by results scheme, with the accelerators, the accelerated linked funds, the vehicle structure and size, the size needs to be related to the market opportunity, of course, and that also determines how large is the relevant deal flow. And the team's ability to tap into the deal flow, that's what we call the active pipeline. But the actual structure, there might be some variability there, and we are open to discuss, because it must fit the market reality. It's an emerging market. There are not that many sort of accelerator-linked funds, for instance, up and running. So we are in contact with quite a number of them who are still in construction. And we'll be happy to discuss to see how the requirements that we have to typically judge an investment seat, all these requirements that are on this slide or sort of summarized on this slide, whether they are present. But the actual structure, there should be some flexibility. And I really hope that there are also in the audience that are listening that there are people who are representing some of these financial intermediaries or some of these financial intermediaries that are being set up. And we really hope to get into dialogue with you and work with you on this. Now at the bottom there's the terms and conditions, downside protection and alignment of interest. Those are typical aspects and very important aspects that all need to be addressed in the final to agreed structure of the investment proposition. But as said, they can take different shapes than the typical venture capital. As a typical venture capital one, alignment of interest probably will contain, for instance, some element of co-investment. A downside protection would also be some sort of financial protection for us, and terms of conditions, for instance, they could be quite fairly depending on the structure. So this is really to try in one summary slide what are the different aspects we look at, and if this makes sense to us, if this works, then we have a viable investment proposition. If we move on to the final slide, I'll hand the floor back to Sylvia for rounding up.
Thank you, Yvette. Now some information about the administrative work. So if you are interested in submitting an application to be funded under EFSI, what should you do? Well, first the deadline, we have still some time, so it's the 5th of May 2018, so almost, let's say, 1 year and a half. We have created, of course, a dedicated web page and a dedicated email address to which you should submit your application. In order to be eligible, so in order to be considered, how the application should be structured. Well, first, of course, should be drafted in English, then shall contain what we call the Annex 1, which is available on the website, and it is basically on one side is the expression of interest for you to be considered under the EFSI. On the other side is a representation that we require to the financial intermediary that means that they are not in certain exclusion situation, like for instance being bankrupt. And you have the full list in this annex. And then, of course, the proposal shall contain your investment pitch, let's say, or your private placement memorandum, for instance, with the minimum information which Yvette just summarized in the first slide. So information about the management team, the investment strategy, the track record, the market, the potential deal flow, and so on and so forth. Following that, the IF will perform a first eligibility check. And then I would like to highlight two very important pillars of our assessment that go hand in hand. So one does not exclude the other. On one side, we're going to analyze the investment readiness of your proposal. So the who, why, how, and what, just to say in a few key words. On the other side, equally important is the policy fit. And under EFSI, this is particularly important because we have this concept of the EU value added that should be demonstrated for each and every investment proposal. And here we have a list of 6 indicators, and the proposal to be considered eligible under this particular program has to meet at least one indicator. So here you have the indicators, for instance, the multi-country focus, or whether you will support the internationalization of the portfolio companies, or whether you invest in country where the private equity or the venture capital activities is below average, or whether you have a particular focus targeting, for instance, 70% in the social enterprises, or 50% business angels, or technology transfer, or for the, let's say, Innofin early stage part of the program, whether you support investments in the Horizon 2020 sectors. So this is a very important part, actually an essential part of the assessment, because it determines the eligibility of the investment proposal. It is important also to say a very few words about the EIF process. So the EIF process entails basically a few steps. First, we will have the first screening, where we try to understand the concept that you are trying to communicate to us, and do a basic eligibility check and fit. Then we move to the second screening to check the actual investment readiness, where you will have a chance to articulate the investment opportunities, and we will also have the possibility to understand better your value proposition. Then the next step is like a due diligence meeting, where this might lead or might not lead to the final step, which is the legal negotiation, which is of course also subject to the approval of our governing bodies. Now, it goes without saying that, I mean, only the successful investment proposals will actually go through all the stage that eventually will lead to the signature of the investment proposal. This just to give you a flavor about what type of assessment and what type of key steps our process is made of. And then I'll leave you basically with the last slide, where actually you find, apart from our contact details, and you're more than welcome to contact us for any questions, but then here you have also some important link to the website for SIA, for the EASY program that Shadin mentioned, and then the third one is precisely to the EFSI, which, as we said, is a general program, and there you have the overall documents linked to the cause for expression of interest, which determines actually the key criteria and the key terms and conditions. But then, as at the bottom of the web page, if you go there, you have the guidance for social impact investors, where we try to summarize in a nutshell what are the key aspects that you should look at if you're interested in sending a proposal. And I think with this, I mean, I'll leave Eleanor wrap up perhaps.
Thank you very much, Sylvia and Yvette. I think this gives us truly very practical information about these instruments, and I see quite a few practical questions popping up also on my screen. I'll come back to those in a minute, but maybe to start with, I think in the principle, I have a series of questions related to the location of the intermediary or the social enterprise in this process, and I'll ask maybe Shadin to come back to these questions. I'll read them out loud so those who have asked them can recognize the questions. The first one is, are UK-based organizations eligible for funding? That's one question about location of intermediaries. The second one is, okay, what about, can certain international NGOs be considered as social enterprises, and if yes, on which ground? Which key criteria do they have to meet? Another question. Another question also is about, okay, if I am practically, if I am an entrepreneur in France, what is the practical process to apply to such EU funding? Is it through a French intermediary or directly to your teams? So I think these questions show that maybe it's important to make it clear what kind of entity these funding are designed for. So I'll let you maybe shed in reply.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you for the questions that were raised. So to answer the first question about whether UK-based organizations would be eligible for EU funding. So first of all, of course, this depends on the instrument that we're referring to, but generally speaking, yes, all countries in the EU member states, of which the UK is part of, are eligible funding. The condition here, of course, is for final recipients. In other words, social enterprises that would benefit from some form of EU funding would have to be established in the EU member state in question. So that was the first part. The second question was whether, for example, some international NGOs would be considered eligible as social enterprises. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, social enterprises are defined based on three key dimensions, which are social, entrepreneurial, and governance. Now here, the main legal basis for this definition is the one that is related to the EASY program, which is the EASY regulation. And here I might be very technical in giving the exact reference number, but it's regulation 1296/2013 under Article 2. I'm sorry for the very technicality here, but in other words, here, the way in the social enterprise is defined is that it means any undertaking, regardless of its legal form, which, as long as it has an established primary objective, which is social in nature, and seeks to generate positive and social impacts rather than generating profit for its own members, owners, and shareholders, and that it provides services or goods which generate social return or employs a method of production that embodies its social objective. That is one aspect. The other two are, as I mentioned, was it first and foremost uses its profits to achieve its primary objective and has limits on its distribution of profits. And third, finally, is that it is managed in an entrepreneurial, accountable, and transparent way. So those are really the key characteristics and criteria to be eligible to be considered a social enterprise under this definition. And finally, the third question, which was a very practical question, is, for example, for a social entrepreneur in France, how can they go about getting EU funding? Well, generally speaking...
Would you like me to take that one, Shagan?
Generally, yes, but I'll just say a few words and then I'll then pass it on. So generally speaking, we use what we call the intermediate financing model. In other words, we have 4 different relative levels. First of all, the Commission on one side provides funding. This is then managed, depending on instruments, by the European Investment Fund, which is the second level, which is then channeled to financial intermediaries that are established in the different member states or participating countries. And finally, these financial intermediaries then provide funding directly in other forms of loans or other types of instruments to social enterprises. So in other words, if you're a social entrepreneur based in France, so the idea then is to get in touch with financial intermediaries that are on the ground in your respective countries. So to be very concrete, for example, in the case of the EFSI guarantee, which was launched, as I mentioned earlier, there we have in France l'ANEF, which currently benefits from EFSI guarantee and is in touch with the European Investment Fund in this respect. So there would give you the answer. And in the case of the UK, for example, it is Key Fund. So.
Thank you, Shadine.
Yes, thank you.
Maybe for our colleagues at the EIF, because I see quite a few technical questions also addressed to you, and we could maybe address those in the last 15 minutes of this webinar. For Yvette, there are a few questions about. I'll read them out loud, and then maybe you can address those. One person is referring to the 9 funds who received money from the SIA, Social Impact Accelerator, saying that those had to comply with a minimum of 5 million euro of investment by EIF. So this person would like to have it cleared, like, is there any minimum amounts for these new instruments, the equity instruments? So that's one question. Another question is about, like, for which of the 3 products the equity instruments, the EIF intervened for more than 50% of total investment capacity? I think you mentioned that at the beginning, and maybe it's worth making this clear. A very practical question for either of you is really, what is the deadline of May 2018? So it's quite far from now. What does it exactly mean? What kind of workload does that entail, to submit an interest to be an intermediary with the EIF? So these are very complex, not complex, but important questions, and I think it's worth reading them out loud. So I'll let the floor to Sylvia and Yvette maybe to start with.
Yeah, shall I? Well, I'm a little puzzled by the minimum of 5 million for the CIA. As far as I'm aware, we don't have that. The truth is that with venture capital funds, we do look at more sizable tickets, but there is no real defined minimum of 5 million.
Okay.
Although in practice, if you'd go lower, it would be a lot of small investments, considering that we have a 243 million pocket. And with Sylvia, want to add something there?
No, actually, they asked whether we have a minimum under the new EFSI tools. Per se, we don't have defined amount, but it's the investment that we will undertake on the EFSI must be at least 7% of the size of the investment vehicle, for instance. So this per se is like a limit, and the upper limit is then 50% with few exceptions. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a question about the EIF taking more than 50%?
Mm-hmm. No, the question was whether, let me see, because now I just...
Sorry.
Yeah, the question precisely was for which of the 3 products does the EIF intervene for more than 50% of total investment capacity?
No, technically we have the flexibility under the social impact window to hold more than 50% in each and every product under the social. So incubators, business angels and PBR. But the typical percentage that we get is really up to 50%. But we have this flexibility among the 3 instruments.
And then the last question was the deadline of May 2018.
Yes.
What does that mean? Basically, it means that we need to have made the investment by...
No. It means that the applications is received by the IF by that date.
Okay.
And then after the application is received, it starts the overall EIF assessment process. So the deadline is the receipt of the application, basically.
So that means that the length of the process, which may vary largely depending on how ready or how quickly the proposition is ready, often it could be that a lot of structuring, that actually falls outside of the scope of that date, basically.
Okay.
So it means that if you have submitted your proposal by that date, we could still be working on your proposal after that date.
Okay,
correct.
That's very useful to know. Maybe while I'm with you, Sylvia, at the beginning you also mentioned some restricted sectors, related to EFSI products. Can you just say a word about these?
Yes, so on the EIF website there is this EIF restricted sectors policy, and to be honest, I can't remember all the sectors by heart, but this relates, for instance, to the market of weapons, to gambling, probably alcohol and tobacco. So there is a policy which has of course been approved by our board and is publicly available on our website. So basically the key concept with regards to EFSI is the following, that we can't undertake investment in financial intermediaries, and in turn the financial intermediaries can't really make, let's say, investment in companies which contravene these sectors. This is the important message, and these are considered really as excluded final recipients, which means that a financial intermediary is not allowed to invest in such entities.
Thank you, Sylvia and Sylvia and Yvette. Yes, I see a few other questions. One that is a little bit general, but maybe it's worth just including it here. A question that is actually for the EC and the EIF, but I'll ask it here to my colleagues at the Commission. How does the EC and the EIF wish and intend to engage with practitioners? I know this is a vague question, but it can be, some question that is shared by other practitioners.
So I'll take this point. This is Shirin Viratam from the European Commission. So thank you for having raised this question. It's a very good question. So very concretely, one way we go about to try and ensure that we remain close to the ground and in contact with practitioners is, for example, through the EVPA network itself, so the European Venture Philanthropy Association, which we partly finance. And this allows us to be really close to practitioners that are on the ground and to be aware of things and latest trends that are going on. So I would say this is one very concrete manner. Of course, there are different ways as well that we go about, but I will at least give you this example have in mind.
And maybe because you briefly mentioned this upcoming initiative on capacity building, but if I understand correctly, these will be financial means in order to support non-financial support in a sense.
Yes, so in essence, the underlying goal behind this capacity building is to help the financial intermediaries themselves,
exactly,
either under the microfinance or the social entrepreneurship axis. The idea here is indeed this money will not go directly to the final recipients, in other words, social enterprises, but will be used by financial intermediaries through, for example, equity investments to help them fund capacity building investments such as, and I mean this could be for various different purposes such as IT infrastructure, as I mentioned, scaling up, branching out into mobile banking, that could be an example. Could be investments in branching out further to cover regions that were not previously served by the intermediary in question. It could also be contributing to operating expenses that aim at contributing to the intermediary's own financial sustainability. Mm-hmm. So it's really a wide range of investments, including in human capital, exactly, that are key for these intermediaries to really expand and reach out to the recipients, in other words, social enterprises, but also micro-entrepreneurs that we want to reach out to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think this connects also to some work that EVPA has done on describing NFS, we call non-financial support, just what is provided to social enterprises on top of the money, whether through a loan, an equity investment, or even a grant. So yeah, Shadim?
No, I just, it's a very important point here, Eleanor. I just want to emphasize this as well. I mean, giving money is one thing, but money in itself is not enough. So that's why it's really key to have this capacity building, but also non-financial support means to really complement the funding that is given, because this is really, in the end, what makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I have another question here, maybe to Georgia. Some participant would like to have some more information about the high-level task force on social infrastructure. That person is wondering whether this task force has started to meet. What exactly is it working on? I know it's maybe not totally started, but can you say a little word?
Indeed, this has been an initiative in preparation for a long time, already over a year. It is endorsed by the Commission, but it was started by the European Long-Term Investment Association. And after a year of coordinating, actually I'm happy to announce that the high-level steering group of this task force is kicking off with a meeting actually next week on the 28th, as I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And maybe here it will be a good occasion to mention that although this task force is for social infrastructure projects, we do have a parallel initiative now for social impact investment that is more in the social entrepreneurship domain. First, there is the GSG, it's a global steering group under the G8. And then there is one additional initiative that is going to be a task force for social impact investment specifically dedicated to investment in Central and Eastern Europe, which is a very, very exciting initiative.
Fantastic.
Which we also endorse as a Commission.
Well, that's great to hear. Okay, I'm still looking at the questions. There's a few that we can take more because in 5 minutes we will close the webinar. A couple of questions. Actually, there's one question here for the EIF, I think, which is a combination between the guarantee and the equity dimensions. So the question is, I understand that the EIF provides guarantees on lending for financial intermediaries. So that's the instrument that was launched in June last year. But does this also extend to equity investments in social enterprises? So I think I know the answer, but I think it's interesting. So maybe I can let Yvette or Sylvia answer.
Hello. Just to repeat the question, so if we understand correctly, so we launched indeed the guarantee instrument under EASY, thanks to which we provide a guarantee up to a certain amount on the lending activities of the financial intermediary. The question is whether this guarantee is also extended to equity.
Yes, exactly, because the guarantee that was launched, in my understanding, is really for social, for financial intermediaries that are lending money to social enterprises, not investing money in the form of equity. So I think the guarantee is limited to loans and not equity, is that right?
Yes, loans, I mean, and other typical or similar products.
Okay.
It's basically, it's also the main, let's say that this is also the main type of activities that we observe in the financial intermediaries that we are currently financing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, no, that's clear. And maybe another couple of questions, and then I think we will almost have answered everything. And again, if I realize that some questions have not been addressed, I'll make sure to follow up after this webinar. A question about the form of the intermediary that can, apply for the call. So a question is there a way through one of the available EU instruments for corporate social impact fund to get a guarantee all or part of an investment on social enterprises? So that's for the guarantee. And then there's another question, I think, more for the equity that is now being launched. Are impact private equity funds eligible? I guess the answer is yes, but I think it's worth making these answers clear. Yes, I think it's for the EIF. Sorry, I haven't really mentioned.
You're unmuted, yes. Yeah, we were bubbling with the. So the first one were guarantees. I think it remains the same question and same answer as Sylvia just answered. The guarantees are not on equity. Guarantees are on loans. So I guess it's the same answer. In whether it is for impact private equity funds, we have a typical the SIA, the Social Impact Accelerator, is actually focused on private equity impact private equity funds. So the 3 EFSI instruments we're looking at the moment are actually intended to be complementary to the SIA rather than overlapping with it.
But technically, yes, the fund is eligible. I mean, provided that all the eligibility criteria that we described earlier on are met, it is eligible, yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. One more question maybe quickly for you, Shadin, because it refers to what we were saying at the beginning. There's a couple of questions about if a financial intermediary is funding enterprises that are active outside the EU, to what extent are these eligible, like in Africa or in emerging markets? And if it's not possible to use these instruments for this type of social enterprises, are there any other instruments or resources at the EU level that we should be looking at? I don't know if you know, but I think it's interesting.
So I can really give a quick answer there. So no. So these social enterprises have to be established in the member states or participating countries on the EU, in the case of the guarantee at least. With regards to other EU level financial instruments that can be used and to channel funding towards social enterprises that are established outside of the Union, there I believe, I don't have the immediate answer here, but I believe there are other programs, for example, that are managed by the EIB group, the European Investment Bank group, which really branch out outside of the Union. Because the focus of our activities here, at least from the Commission's view, for example, for the EASY program, is really on the European Union itself. But of course, there are other programs that exist which complement and branch out to other regions.
Okay, that's important, I think. I'm looking at the time here, and we are really now 4:30, so I think it's just the right time to close the webinar. So many thanks again to all our panelists for the time you have spent in this session and for having shared your expertise so openly with us. So Shadin, Georgia, Sylvia, and Yvette, I think this was really interesting and very valuable information for everyone. This will be made available on our website in the course of next week, the recording and the presentation. So don't hesitate to look it up. Just before we close, when you will leave the session, you will have the short survey popping out. So I invite you all to take a 2-minute time of your time to fill it in, because it's really useful for us. And before we really close, we would like just to thank EVPA sponsors, the BMW Foundation and the MUD Foundation, as well as the European Commission, of course. So stay tuned on our website for the recording, but also for the next sessions of our EU webinar series in 2017. We're scheduling three more webinars towards March, June, and October. So stay tuned, and thank you again to everyone.
Thank you.